Hey, everybody, it's Scott Steehn with winnersandwhiners.com. Welcome back to our final installment of taking a look at the NFL teams by win total. We have done 7 divisions. There is just one left, and that is the AFC West, the home of the world champion Kansas City Chiefs, as well as the brand new team out there in the desert, the Las Vegas Raiders. And we thought we would bring a guy directly from Las Vegas to talk a little bit about that AFC Western division. If you're a regular, if you listen to the VSiN network, ESPN, he's been everywhere and he's done a lot of things in his short time here on Earth. He's one of our favorites. We used to have him on the podcast a lot. He's a great guy. He's normally the host of The Edge over there on VSiN every afternoon. He is Jonathon von Tobel. JVT, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Scott. Thank you very much. It hasn't been that short of a time. I turned 30 this year, so I'm getting up there, but my life's flashing before my eyes. But no, it's been going well for everything that's been going on. It's been going very well. The family's doing well. VSiN is, we've cut back on the hours, but we're still churning out programming. So I think for everything considered, I think everything's going pretty dang well.
Excellent. And when is the best time to catch you over there on VSiN? I know you had the daily gig there in the afternoon. What are your new COVID-19 hours, if you will?
So right now I'm just writing for the most part right now, but you can check out all the work. If you go to VSiN.com, we have VSiN Plus subscriptions. They're actually all free now until major sports return. So I write for our weekly magazine, Point Spread Weekly, so you can find all my work there. And, I'll pop in from time to time on the shows that are still on, Follow the Money, a numbers game. But right now it's all writing for the most part until we maybe some podcasts in the work, something like that. But for right now, it's just all in print for me.
Excellent. Well, I highly recommend their guides. I've got the NCAA basketball guide. I got the baseball. You guys do great work. Your guides over there for the upcoming seasons are absolutely invaluable, and you do great work for the written part as well. So very nice.
I appreciate it. Actually, I got one right here. I was the main hand for writing our NBA guide. So there's one right there for you too.
JVT, just real quick, I know you guys were doing every NBA game last season. How did that end up? Who ended up being the winner?
So it's funny. So, yeah, last year I wanted to pick every NBA game against the spread for fun to see how it would go. But they also had me traveling to Atlantic City every weekend.
Right.
I kind of for lack of a better term, I was just like, I'm tired of this. I'm not doing this anymore. So I just stopped doing it. Like, I think – by the time I reached November, no, not even November, I think it was December, I was like, all right, I was on a plane back from Philly. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and I was dog tired. And I'm like, and I just had my kid. I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right. So, were you winning when you decided it wasn't worth the effort? That's the question.
I have to go back. I think we were all floating around. There was 3 of us, and I think we were all floating around 500 within. It was actually, for picking every NBA game, I think we were all within like 10 games of 500, both above or below, somewhere around there. So I think it was going as well as you could expect when you're picking an NBA season, every single game in that regard. So this season's gone much better because I've been much more selective.
So in other words, you can claim that you won and it was so close that nobody would argue with you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That works.
Nice.
Just don't do the Twitter search. You know what I mean? No.
And that third face you see there is my normal partner in crime. He joins us here from Winners and Whiners every day to take a look at various things in sports. He is direct from Long Island. He is Scott Reichel. Scott, how are you today, buddy?
Doing pretty well. Got some mixed emotions, though. I know that we were originally game planning. You mentioned it yesterday that I was going to be doing a UFC show with Winning Willie on Monday.
Yeah, unfortunately, that didn't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, the UFC 249 ended up getting canceled. It should be pushed back. I know Dana White had an interview with ESPN, and he said that Fight Island is still a go. I'm not really sure how exactly it's going to work out. That should be a documentary on Netflix in a couple of years. But either or, all the fights hopefully will still happen, just maybe a month down the road. So maybe Khabib can come back and fight Tony. I don't really know. That remains to be seen. But either or, that's the downside. The bright side is that I took – on my Twitter, I even posted I took Devin Booker to win the 2K tournament at plus 275, and he's currently minus 135 to win the whole thing. So I got a pretty good price there. He's in the semifinals, and hopefully he'll be able to get me a little bit of money there.
Very nice. Very nice. Is it a bad sign that Ja Rule is involved with this Fight Island?
I'll tell you what, it's probably not a good sign, but right. I'm not going to immediately say that the whole thing is doomed. So we'll go that way.
Enough. Well, let's talk a look. Hey, speaking of sports that we don't know if we're going to happen or not, let's take a look at the NFL, shall we?
Yeah.
We have made a commitment to plunge on as if the NFL season will be going on, and we have stuck to that. We have done 7 of the 8 divisions. We're going to do the last one here today. We are highly confident that this season will be played. Of course, being a Kansas City Chiefs fan, we have to be able to defend our title. So let's take a look at the AFC West, and let's start at the top with those world champion Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs went 12-4 last season. The number set by Bet Online is 11.5, and that is juiced to the over at -120. If you wanted to play the under on the boys from Kansas City, you'd be getting even money on that, +100. Scott, what do you think as far as the Chiefs go here? Do you think they didn't do a lot of offseason moves? Word just came down. They did bring back Rashard Breeland. They brought in DeAndre Washington, a running back from Oakland. They brought in Antonio Hamilton, kind of a second-tier cornerback there as far as to play. But they franchised Chris Jones. Not a lot of movement, bringing back Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson. We're going to have 20 of their 22 starters that will be returning. Scott, what do you think about those Kansas City Chiefs?
Well, generally when you say that they brought back most of a team, that tends to not exactly be a great sign. But when you win the championship, I feel like that's probably the best thing you could possibly do, is to try to keep the band back together. They could have made a couple of changes here or there. I expect them to address some depth issues in the draft. But as a whole, they ended up winning 12 games last year, and Mahomes got injured for about a month, and they lost a couple of close games there with Matt Moore at the helm. For me, I know that according to most people, they'll tell you to take the under just based on expected regression in the NFL. But they even got most of the coaching staff back, which kind of surprised me, as I kind of thought that some of the coaches would end up getting a lot of money elsewhere to become head coaches. That did not happen. So for me, even though this total is high, I still think they're the best team in the entire league. So I got to take the over.
JVT, what do you think? A little bit of a letdown for the Kansas City Chiefs, or are they in a position to kick off that dynasty?
Yeah, I think I'd rather bet this one under if we're looking at the 11.5, or maybe you hold out and by the time we get closer to the season, they do push this up to 12. But I think for me, when it comes to Kansas City, the one worry I have with them is actually on the defensive side of the ball, considering how bad they were last year, especially against the run. And they really got a lot better during that postseason run. But we see that from time to time with teams, right? Like, I'm a Colts fan. I got the Colts hat on. I remember the 2006 run where defensively they couldn't stop the run at all. And then Bob Sanders comes back and they go on this insane run to win against the Chicago Bears. I still think when you look at a team that was 29th in 27th in most, major statistical categories against the run, that's pretty worrisome when you bring back 20 of 22 guys. So I think that for me is what I look at when I look at this Kansas City Chiefs team, because I would think offensively, you could actually expect some improvement from Mahomes just with general health, because it wasn't just the kneecap, right? It was a hand issue late. He had a sprained ankle, especially in that time when they lost against the Colts on Sunday night. So I think really it just comes down to how good can this defense be? Can they get better from last year? Because there were times when they were one of the worst run defenses in the National Football League.
Right. Now, and I can tell you that the thought around Kansas City is that people have started the players started to buy into Spagnuolo's system. They started actually, to get it. It started to click for them. And that was the reason for the dramatic improvement over the second half of the season. We'll see. And I always like to take a look at the schedule. And the Chiefs, they match up this year with the AFC East and the NFC South. Not exactly two powerhouse divisions. At home, they do play the Pats, the Jets, the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Texans. It would be difficult to not see the Chiefs going at least 4-1 in that stretch. On the road, they go against the Ravens, Bills, Dolphins, Saints, and Bucks. That sounds like 3-2 or 2-3 to me. And that means the Chiefs need to go 5-1 in conference, maybe even run the table at 6-0. And that does sound like a difficult hill to climb, except we have to remember the fact that the Chiefs have gone 27-3 in the AFC West over the last 5 seasons. 2 times they've gone a perfect 6-0, 3 times they've gone 5-1. With that division still not a very strong one, I'm going to have to lean towards the over in this one. I just don't see where the losses come. I'm a believer. Maybe have a little bit of my red shades on here, so we'll see. But I think the Chiefs have bought in, and I think they're starting to master the Steve Spagnuolo defensive system. I'm going to go with a slight over with the 11.5 here. So
I'm sure that has nothing to do with you being a Chiefs fan at all.
You know what? I try to be objective about that, and the thing I keep coming back to is their division record and the fact that division still. We'll take a look at it here, but there's been some improvement for a couple of teams, but there's still not a great division there in the NFL. Let's take a look at the Broncos next. Their win total is set at 7.5. And we're, again, juiced to the over at minus 125. You can get you plus 105 if you want to play the under on the Broncos there. Broncos went 7-9 last year. JVT, big news for the Broncos is the one-year Joe Flacco experiment is over. It is now Drew Lock's team, as everyone suspected would ultimately be the case. Is he the man to take the Denver Broncos and John Elway there finally to the promised land?
I think if you look at the straight-up record, obviously you would have a lot of hope, right? He went 4-1 in the 5 games as a starter, but a lot of the numbers were really underwhelming. 204 yards per game through the air, just 6.4 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Now, it's his first stint as a starting quarterback, so those are really passive numbers for a quarterback. So I think you need to make sure that he's going to take that next step, be able to be an aggressive thrower of the ball. And I think there's just the jury's still out on that at that point. And I think it does, and I think he dealt with some injuries throughout the season, but I think it does worry you why he was kept so long on the bench and getting ready for the NFL season, considering Joe Flacco and whatever they're throwing out there at quarterback wasn't very good. But at the same time, I think when you look at this team overall, you have to like what they did with their defense. They finished last year 13th overall in DVOA. You trade for A.J. Bowie. You get Jarrell Casey as well. I think that really helps improve a team that could be a top 10 defense. And they have a strong running game, and it was strong before they bring in Melvin Gordon. So I think overall this team's better. It just revolves around, is Drew Lock going to take that next step? Because in today's NFL, 200 yards per game and 6.5 yards per attempt are not going to get you anywhere as a quarterback.
No, and I totally agree there. Is Boyer going to be able to make up for the loss of Chris Harris? Do you think that's an upgrade there at the cornerback position?
I'm not sure if it's an upgrade, but it definitely lessens the blow, right? I think that's what helps you out is if you're getting rid of somebody that was that important to your defense, you at least replace them with someone that is near the same level in the same ballpark, and I think that just helps with everything that's going on with that. But I think adding a guy like Jarrell Casey, think about that front seven. That's a dominant front seven that the Denver Broncos have.
Yeah, absolutely monsters. And I've got the Broncos there set up as going 2-3 at home and 3-2 on the road. Their matchups that are outside of their divisions are the Titans and the Steelers. I think those are both winnable games for this team. It means they have to go 3-3 in the division. You know what? I think there's enough bad games in the AFC West that they can pull that 500 record off. Scott, what do you say here with the Denver Broncos? Are you interested? You buying in on got a little Bronco fever out there, buddy?
Bronco fever is a little bit stretched for a team that could go 8-8, but as a whole, I definitely think that they had one of the most underrated off seasons in the entire NFL. I really loved almost all the moves that they made. Melvin Gordon, even though his contract holdout was an absolute disaster, arguably one of the worst of all time, it doesn't change the fact that he's significantly better than Royce Freeman, and you set up a very capable 1-2 punch there with Phillip Lindsay. Now, I know that we were talking about how Locke and his stats with regard to his passing yards per game weren't exactly the most impressive, but the fact of the matter is he's still a young quarterback, and the Broncos bring in Gordon pretty much said that we can let Locke develop behind a quality running game, maybe add some more play action elements because of the ability to actually run the ball in the trenches, which isn't exactly Phillip Lindsay's strength. And other than that, though, the one concern I do have with the Broncos that we did mention about Drew Lock is kind of a sophomore slump situation with Lock. When other teams compile enough film on opposing quarterbacks, they can start game planning a little bit, forcing him to do things that he's not fully comfortable with. And I'm a little bit concerned that as the season progresses and as teams continue to get more and more film on Lock, that they might force him with either some defensive packages or just force him to roll out to some direction that he's not comfortable with. I wouldn't be surprised to see him struggle a little bit more in his sophomore year at times. But as a whole, you already mentioned how weak the division is, and I still really love the Boye addition. Now, I still think that Harris is slightly better, but they gave up a 4th-round pick to get Boye, and he's still a very solid corner. So I kind of agree with all the points mentioned. Is he an upgrade? No. But it definitely is a solid replacement based on what they had to give up or what little they had to give up, so to speak. The main concern I still have with the Broncos is going to be the offensive line. The fact that Garrett Bowles is still a starting tackle in the league is always a concerning factor. But, I mean, you can make jokes about that all day. But as a whole, I actually really like the moves they made. Plus, they lost a ton of close games last year with Flacco at the helm, which is part of the reason why he ended up getting benched for the rest of the year due to quote-unquote injury concerns after he threw the entire coaching staff under the bus in that press conference against Indianapolis. But for me, that a lot of close losses last year, I actually like what I saw from Locke and the improvements defensively to the defensive line with Casey and the running back core. I actually think they're going to go 8-8, so for me, I'm going to take the over.
All right, very good. All right, let's move on to the newest team out there in the desert. We're going to be playing. I didn't even know what the official name is. We're forever and always in Kansas City. At least we're going to call it the Death Star. It is the Las Vegas Raiders. By the way, get your bets down on how many times I say Los Angeles or Oakland Raiders.
Right.
So,
Take the over. Take the over.
absolutely, take
People
the
still
over.
call them the San Diego Chargers, like to this day.
My dad still does that.
Yeah.
Me too. I absolutely do that. No question about it. The Raiders' number is 7.5, minus 110 on each side. They did go 7-9 last year. They made a lot of moves. One of the most active teams in the offseason so far. One of the biggest ones was signing Marcus Mariota out of Tennessee to a 2-year deal, $17.6 million, 7.5 guaranteed for this season. JVT, do you guys have Raider fever out there in the desert?
They totally do. I say they, and not me so much, but yeah, they lit up Allegiant Stadium the other day for the first time. So all the lights were on and everything, and it looks pretty good from the outside. And I think there's a lot of people excited to see what this team's going to be. Of course, everything that is going on in the world has to happen the year that they moved to Las Vegas, where I think the town is pretty excited for it. And the Vegas Golden Knights really set it up for professional sports to come in here, or at least, some of the top leagues to come in. So there is an appetite for it in terms of the fan base. As far as the team, for me, it all starts with this defense because they've made a lot of moves defensively. You mentioned all the free agent signings. Of course, Corey Littleton coming in, one of the better coverage linebackers that was available in free agency, Nick Wachowski as well. So they're trying to upgrade that linebacking core. But for me, it starts in two areas with the defense. One is the pass rush. They finished 27th in adjusted sack rate last year, just 32 total sacks for this team. The other is turnovers. Because think about this. They actually finished tied for 7th as an offense for the fewest turnovers as a unit, but they still had a -2 turnover differential and the second least amount of forced turnovers as a unit. So those are two key categories in which you need to improve if you're the Raiders. And this is a Raiders team that had that brutal road stretch where they didn't play at home for, I think it was at 5 weeks. They had to go to London, then true road games, finally came back home against the Lions. But defensively, that's where I need to see this team improve because I think offensively they're going to be okay. I don't think they're going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL, but they still finished in the top 10 in DVOA in offense. It's just all about, can you get those explosive plays out of your defense? And I'm not sure if the signings that they made, I think they're better defensively, but I don't see any signings that make me think, okay, the pass rush is going to get dramatically better. You're going to force more turnovers. And that's where my questions still are with this team.
Yeah, they brought in Carl Nassib from Tampa Bay. He's a decent sack guy, had six sacks his last 2 seasons. They brought in Malik Collins from Dallas there to clog up the middle. But I'm like you. I definitely want to see what they can do with some edge rushers, see if they can generate some pressure. Scott, what do you think about these Raiders? Is Derek Carr going to start feeling the hot breath of Marcus Mariota on his neck now with the addition there? Is his time in Las Vegas, is those days numbered, or are they just bringing in for just to have a capable backup? What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how numbered his days are going to be, considering the massive contract that they extended for him. And if they decide to cut him, that's a huge cap hit. So that's something worth keeping in mind. I'll actually get into the Carr Mariota dynamic in a sec. I was going to say, if you plan on taking the over or the under for the Raiders, my advice to you would be to wait till after the first day of the draft. They do have 2 first-round picks, and if you want to see what direction they are potentially headed in, this line isn't going to change depending on who they draft, in my opinion. So if you want to wait on that 7.5, you probably should do so for a couple weeks until after day 1. See what they're going to do. The Raiders, everyone knows, have been one of the most unpredictable, if not the most unpredictable team on draft days, and I think that definitely is something worth keeping in mind. Now, overall for the team, I'll first address your hot take question with regard to Derek Carr and Mariota. I do not think Derek Carr is going to start all 16 games this season. That's my hot take of the actual thing. Overall, I just don't think this Raiders team is very good. I think that if you look at them compared to the other 3 teams in the division, I think they're the worst team overall, just from talent top to bottom. I think especially in a new environment, if the Raiders get off to a slow start and the fans in the new environment in Vegas are booing the team constantly, being a little bit Raider Nation-like, I wouldn't be surprised to see the front office or the coaching staff panic and potentially make a quarterback change at some point in the middle of the season if Carr isn't getting it done. Do I think Carr is a good quarterback? I think he's okay. I don't think he's awful by any means. I think he's a mediocre quarterback. But at the end of the day, if your team is struggling and you believe, kind of similar to what happened with Mariota, ironically, last year at Tennessee, if you make a quarterback switch with the hope of providing a spark for the team, I think Mariota's mobility could hypothetically provide a spark, at least enough for the coaching staff to consider making a move. So for me, I don't think the Raiders are going to be very good. I'll go into the details on that in a sec, but I would not be surprised to see Mariota start at least one game in the upcoming season. But talking about the Raiders as a whole, they made a lot of moves in free agency. Besides the Corey Littleton signing, which I absolutely love, I think he's one of the best coverage linebackers in the entire league. Really wasn't a big fan of all the moves they made to the secondary. I know that they brought in Demarius Randall and Jeff Heath. Not really a big fan of either player as I've watched them. I thought Randall was okay with the Packers, not great. And Jeff Heath with the Cowboys I thought was pretty underwhelming at times. As a whole, they also had some injury issues last year with Jonathon Abrams, so him staying healthy would definitely help with the secondary. I just really don't like the pass rush, as we talked about before, and the cornerbacks on the active roster. I thought they probably should have made a move for a corner. I'm not saying they should have spent a ton of money on Byron Jones or Bradbury, but you could have potentially gotten a Roby or a Desmond Trufant, something like that. They're relying on a couple of unknowns here. They might move a Marcus Joyner back to cornerback spot that really remains to be seen. But as a whole, I don't really like the secondary. I don't really like the linebacking core. It's definitely better with Littleton. And I don't really like the pass rush. So for me, I don't really like any part of this defense. And for that reason, I got to take the under.
You sound like a Shark Tank there. And for those reasons, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, I ranted a little bit there, but I had a lot to say about them. Is there any part of the defense that you actually like? I know that Cleveland's still very young, and he showed some signs. There's no one area that I just look at them and say, I have faith in this unit. I just don't see it.
All right, good enough. I
don't know what you think, but that defense has so many questions. I just don't trust it.
I think they've improved. I definitely think that they were the weak link of this team last year. I like the additions that they've made. You know what? I'm with you. I'm a little more high on Demarius Randall than you are. I think a little higher, but yeah, we'll see how that works out. JVT, what do you think? Have they made enough improvements here on defense to get it done?
In terms of getting it done like over the win total, I would be a little wary about it just because I don't know how good they would be defensively. And to answer the question, I think at this point, just with the free agent signings, it's got to be the linebacking core, right? Like you mentioned, I think we're both in agreement. Littleton's a really good signing. I think adding Kukowski really helps them too. So I think at this point, your strength is linebacker, but that's about it when you look at this team overall. And you look at their opponents too. I mean, it's quietly a really hard schedule. At home, you have to host Buffalo, Miami, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Indianapolis. 4 of those teams are expected to be much better. Buffalo's a playoff team. Then you got to go the road to the East Coast multiple times in the Eastern time zone, the New York Jets, New England, Cleveland, Atlanta, Carolina. So you look at this overall, and I just feel like it's going to be like another 7-6 win season for the Raiders. And maybe it's more of an ATS, week-to-week type of deal where they show improvement, but it's hard to see them 8-8 or 9-7 given everything. And, we talk with Brent Musburger about this all the time, right? He does Raiders play-by-play for the radio network. It's hard to transition to a new city. And given the fact of everything that's going on, that move is kind of stifled a little bit. A couple of the workers here in Las Vegas for the stadium actually tested positive for the coronavirus. So that actually might, pause the stadium building too. So there's just so much that's going on other than on the field stuff for the Raiders. It just seems like a really tough season to slog through and get to like 8 or 9 wins for.
Well, just one quick question about that. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think they're going to end up going 7-9, 6 or 10. Are there any specific prospects that the Raiders could target in the first round that would make you potentially reconsider that position? Or do you think that they need a couple more pieces before they're actually going to be fighting for over?
I think they probably need a couple more pieces. Like right now, they're really circling, it sounds like, around a wide receiver. And I'm not sure how much a wide receiver pushes you over, 1 win, 1.5 wins at that, especially a rookie wide receiver, right? So I think where they stand right now, I would just say that like their offense could maybe get a little bit better, but it's also going back to your point about Derek Carr, right? Carr, he actually had career numbers, especially if you look like yards per attempt last year, 7.9. That's a career high. He had 70.4 completion percentage. But so much of that is, around the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage. I think he was 30th out of qualified quarterbacks in terms of intended air yards last year, if you look at the next-gen stats. So it's a lot of safe numbers that he puts up. And I just think that everything we've heard about what they're going to do in the draft, it doesn't seem like anything's going to push them over the edge at this point.
Yeah, the one thing we can almost assuredly count on from the Raiders is they will take a wide receiver in the first round that is very fast and not very good. So we'll see how that works out. There is definitely such a plethora of wide receivers available. It would be hard to imagine that the Raiders could screw that up if they went with a wideout. So we'll see what happens. All right, so we'll take a look at the last team in the division here, the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay, I'm 1 for 1 so far. I'm pretty happy about that. They've got their win total set at 7.5, juice to the over at -120. On the other side, that'll get you +100 there at Bet Online. They did go 5-11 last year. And the Chargers have a bit of a problem. They don't really have a quarterback. They're counting on Tyrod Taylor, backed up by Easton Stick of North Dakota State. Scott, what do you think about these Chargers? Is there any possibility here? Any hope? Is it any chance that they can make some noise there in the post Phillip Rivers age?
Well, I think that this is another case where you should probably wait until after the draft to see if you want to take the over-under. There's some rumors the Chargers might go after a quarterback, maybe a Herbert. I heard Tua potentially could be falling. Maybe they can go after him. There remains to be seen. You should probably wait it out. Before I actually give my opinion, I'm just going to state directly, I do not like Anthony Lynn as a coach. I don't think he's very good. I'm not really sure why he was given another year after such an embarrassing showing last season. However, you had a question about the quarterback spot, and even though Tyrod Taylor hasn't been a very good starting quarterback, he's been serviceable, and I have gone through this before. I have pretty much sold all Phillip Rivers stock that I ever had, which was slim to begin with. But I really just thought he was bad last year. There's no real ways around it. I know people kept talking about Winston with his turnover issues. Phillip Rivers was awful last year. I know that you can talk about the touchdowns and how he threw for some yards, and I get that. His decision-making and his arm strength have completely deteriorated, and I really thought that getting rid of him was probably a good thing for the future of the actual franchise. Having said that, this win total at 7.5, I actually love the over on this spot. I know that I have some issue with the coaching staff, which is kind of the one thing that's pulling me back. For the sake of this, I'm going to assume that Tyrod Taylor is the starter. Even though Tyrod Taylor isn't exactly a great starting quarterback, and he's probably average at best, he does have improved mobility over Rivers, which really isn't saying much because Rivers is one of the most immobile quarterbacks in the entire league. But Tyrod Taylor gives you another dimension, and I really loved how he just doesn't turn the ball over historically. And I think that with the Chargers and their improved defense, especially with Derwin James most likely going to be playing a full season after he missed a decent portion of last year. I love the secondary. I love the pass rush with Bosa and Melvin Ingram and even Linval Joseph at the defensive tackle spot. They also got Chris Harris Jr. I really love this defense, and I think if Tyrod Taylor doesn't turn the ball over and they can play time possession football while also pinning opponents deep and kind of creating a defensive-oriented game plan, I love the over. I think this team could really make the playoffs. I think this team could push for 10 or 9 wins. For that reason, I'm going to take the over.
Wowzer. Okay, well, that certainly is a hot take right there. JVT, the Chargers definitely made some moves this season. They got rid of longtime starter Phillip Rivers. They also got rid of Melvin Gordon there, which we talked about earlier, shipping him to Denver. They brought in Chris Harris to play the slot. They're going to move King back to the safety position, which I think is his more natural position. He was not good in the slot. Brought in Linval Joseph to help shore up the run defense. Are you on the Chargers Express as well? You think they got a shot at the playoffs here like young Scott does?
Oh, yeah, I am. I think there's no question that they're the second best team in this division at this point. And you look at it, too, with the expanded postseason, right? You get one extra team into the postseason with the 7th seed. So remember, last year the Steelers missed out. They would have been that team at 8-8. So we're talking about 8-8, 9-7 potentially. And they could totally do that. I mean, look, you're absolutely right, Scott, when you talk about Phillip Rivers being it's an upgrade with him out of there just because of the interceptions. He threw 20 interceptions last year. Tyrod Taylor hasn't thrown more than 6 in a season as a starter. And granted, I think there's an interesting conversation to be had about a guy who doesn't throw interceptions, but also not that many touchdowns as well. His career high was 20 his first year as a starter, got progressively lower after that, 17 and then 14. But if you have a better run game behind him, they improve the offensive line, you go get Balaga, you go get Trey Turner, which is going to really help the offensive line, which is one of their weaknesses as well, which also played into Phillip Rivers' struggles because he is so immobile that a bad offensive line really brought him down as well. And then you look at the defense that you mentioned. This defense is going to be pretty good. I think the one area that we have to talk about that they have to improve is turnovers. I mentioned the Raiders numbers. They were the second least amount of forced turnovers for that defense. The least amount of turnovers I was surprised to see were the Chargers. So they need to be able to force some more turnovers as well. But we know that they have the pass rush, so they have half of that explosive equation taken care of. But I think everything, as you mentioned, revolves around what Tyrod Taylor is going to be as a quarterback. But if I'm getting 15 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, that's automatically an upgrade over 23 touchdowns to 20 interceptions, which Phillip Rivers threw out there last year. Added mobility, maybe you change up your run game and your offensive scheme overall. I think this just looks like really anywhere to go but up from here for the Chargers. And you look at their DVOA metrics as well. Look, their DVOA numbers put them in the range of like a 7-9 team last year. But the reason why they won as few games as they did is because of the turnover issue. So I think really when you look at this overall, this Chargers team is a pretty bright future. Look, they were in the divisional round 2 years ago. We expected them, and I just say the general we, right, the public we, expected them to be a double-digit win type of team this year, but the quarterback play was pretty poor. With the added factor that you're going to get a 7th team in the postseason, I think this is a playoff team. I think it's about a 9-win team, and I think I'd play this one over too.
Well, there you go. And yeah, they did bring in Trey Turner for Russell Okung. They definitely got younger. They definitely got cheaper there at the guard position. So let's go ahead and break it down, guys.
Actually, like I said, before we break it down, just a quick question: are both of you as low on Anthony Lynn as I am, or am I kind of alone here?
I don't think I'm as low as you are. I think he's a slightly below average NFL coach.
Do you think he deserved another year? Do you think he deserved the extension?
Yeah, just because they had so many extenuating circumstances with Gordon and with injuries, I think there's certainly a case to be made that he was due for one more year. JVT, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. And look, he did win a playoff game. And part of the reason why they won that playoff game is he did scheme up a pretty good defense against Lamar Jackson. Granted, Lamar was a rookie that year. It was his first stint as a starter. So there's a lot of circumstances around that. But I think it's hard to find a coach that can regularly get you into the postseason, that can win double-digit games. He's shown that he can actually get this team to improve from time to time. I think he still has a lot to learn as an X's and O's and like game management type of coach. But I think overall, it hasn't been as bad as, like, for example, I actually think Vic Fangio might be the worst head coach in this division. Fangio last year, Scott, you mentioned the close losses for Denver. A lot of those were because Vic Fangio had no idea how to manage a clock or had no idea how to manage his timeouts, and he can improve on that. But I think Fangio was also one of the reasons why Denver was brought down so low last year too. So I think overall, you deserve another year if you can win a playoff game. That's a hard thing to do. And I think this might be a test. You're like, okay, look, your quarterback, because by all actually accounts, he wanted Tyrod Taylor. He didn't want Phillip Rivers last year. So you got your guy. Let's see if you can improve this team because everything else is pretty good. And if they fail, I think, to make to the postseason, make it to 9-7, then you start to look at the change.
Wait, so Scott, what do you like with the Chargers? You didn't give your opinion on it.
As far as I'm not as high on the Chargers as you guys both are. I have to admit, I've just see too many question marks there at the quarterback position. I'm certainly not a Rivers fan, but I'm just not sure Tyrod Taylor is the guy to take you to the promised land. Now, as JVT pointed out, we are getting the extra wild card team this year, going to 7, so it's possible that they sneak in there. But I will say I'm not as high on them as you guys are. Having said that, the 7.5 is a tough number for me. It really is. But I'm going to lean towards the under on the 7.5. I'm going to step out of line here between you two guys. I like the Raiders. I like the Raiders more than I like the Chargers. I'll say that right there. I like the Raiders to pick up more wins than the Chargers this season. Well, let's go ahead and run it down. JVT, give me top to bottom there in the AFC West as far as the teams go, and with the win totals. Kansas City, you agree they're going to be first, and you like the under 11.5, right?
Yeah, so I go Kansas City first, but under the 11.5. I put the Chargers second. I go over that 7.5, and you can shop around. I think I saw like -120, -110, depending on where you look. I would put the Raiders third, and I think I'd probably go under that win total of 7.5. And then the Broncos clearly fourth. I'd go under the win total there as well.
All right, very good. Yeah, and the thing about the Raiders, and JVT brought this up, is all 5 of their road games are going to be played in the Eastern Conference, in the Eastern time zone. So that's you've got travel issues for all their road games, at least the ones that are out of division. Now, I always look at obviously the ones that are out of division, but every time that they fly to play someone that's not in the Western Division, they are going to be in the Eastern time zone. And that's three time zones away if you're scoring at home. And Scotty, what do you say? Top to bottom, who do you like?
Well, I got the Chiefs coming in first. I would not play it personally, but I would lean to the over. Other than that, I got the Chargers in second. I like the over 7.5 there. I actually love that play. It's one of my favorite plays on the board. I like the Broncos to come in third. Slight lean to the over. I wouldn't take it personally. I think they'll probably finish 8-8. And last place, no offense, but I got the Raiders coming in last.
Good enough. All right, I'm going to go ahead and we've been agreeing a lot on this show. I think we're going to be in a little bit of disagreement. I'm going to say that the Chiefs do repeat as Western Division champions there. I just see their domination of this division continuing. For that reason, I like a slight lean towards the over. I like The second place team I do like the Raiders. I think the Raiders go over their win total of 7.5. I think the Broncos, that's a tough one for me. I'll lean under. I think they do finish third, and I do think San Diego, there it is. I think the Los Angeles Chargers bring up the rear and have a disappointing year with and Anthony Lynn is no more after this season. I think they go under the total of 7.5. So there you go, a little something for everybody. I'm just not sold on this team. I hope they're good competitive games, but of course I hope the Chiefs continue their dominance. So guys, I appreciate everyone stopping by as usual. Spend the beautiful Friday with us. JVT, thanks for checking in from the desert, and make sure you listen to JVT. They're on VSiN. Check out all of his guides, and he's a darn fine writer as well as a brilliant personality there online. JVT, just a question. Do we get this NFL season in? Are they going to do it?
Yeah, I would say right now the NFL seems stubborn enough to find a way. So I'll say yes. I would say don't hold your hopes up in terms of being a regular NFL season, but I think we're going to see some sort of NFL season at some point. They're pretty stubborn. It seems like they're digging their heels in. What
about the MLB in Arizona? Any chance there?
I don't think it's going to be in Arizona. I think they'll try the non-fan thing maybe regularly and, charter some flights or whatever it is. But I think the whole sequestering in Arizona thing seems pretty tough, especially I think two of the ballparks are going to be outside. So you're talking about playing in June, outside in Arizona. I don't think that's really something that is feasible for Major League Baseball.
Well, we've got that 6 o'clock start, so it's only going to be like 110. So
yeah.
Well, JVT, thanks very much for joining us here today, man. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, of course, Scott Reichel. Scott, thanks for stopping by. What do you got going on over there in Long Island? Just staying sequestered? Anything happen? Anything exciting on the horizon?
Not really. I was looking forward to UFC 249. Apparently that's not going to exist anymore. It is what it is. Yeah, well put. I agree with that. Other than that, though, no, I'm looking forward to breaking down the baseball season with you next week, and I'm looking forward to providing more content with you every day. So
there you go. And we're going to be doing that for our regular viewers. We are going to be taking a look, kind of an overview of the MLB season tomorrow, and then after taking Sunday off, we will be breaking down division by division starting next week, and then taking a look at the NFL draft, and just kind of moving right into that. So for everybody here at winnersandwhiners.com, for JVT, for Scott Reichel, I'm Scott Steehn. I appreciate you guys all stopping by, checking us out. Keep good hopes, everybody. It's coming back. We're going to have sports again. Keep a good thought and stay optimistic and stay safe, of course. So you guys take care. Thanks for joining us. Check us out every day here at Winners and Whiners. And until next time, you guys take care. Bye-bye.